Summary of Sweep of the Heart written by Ilona Andrews. Chapter 1. The scorching Texas sun beat down on the back porch of Gertrude Hunt bed and breakfast as I relaxed in a wooden recliner, sipping iced tea. The golden sunshine flooded the backyard, and the heat brought stillness to the surroundings. Even the creatures, from squirrels to bugs, sought refuge from the oppressive warmth. Beast, my tiny Shih Tzu, snoozed at my feet while Caldinia, a mysterious guest with concealed sharp teeth, fanned herself and enjoyed a mellow yellow. The air was thick with the heat of a Texas summer, and even the fan in the porch roof provided little relief. The lawn, still green from recent rains, seemed to shimmer in the relentless heat. As I contemplated the wisdom of a nap, Caldinia, ever the instigator, asked about my ongoing endeavors. I shook my head, signaling no luck in my current task. "Then I will have to help you, my dear," Caldinia declared, rising gracefully and donning a straw hat before strolling into the kitchen. The kitchen, a bustling hub within Gertrude Hunt, revealed itself to my magical senses. Aro, the imposing red cleaver chef with foot-long quills, diligently worked on wiping down the counters. Caldinia's intervention aimed to provide me with the opportunity for some much-needed rest. The plan unfolded as Caldinia announced her intention to retire for the afternoon. Aro, in response to her suggestion, rumbled something in agreement. With anticipation building, I focused on guiding him toward the den, where he would settle into his nest for a lengthy nap. Once the coast was clear, I leaped into action. Beast, startled by my sudden movement, barked as I hurried inside the kitchen. A strategic plan formed in my mind. Operation Apple Cake was a go. I swiftly preheated the oven, aware of the limited time I had before Oro's inevitable return. Tendrils of magical wood emerged from the pantry, grabbing ingredients and utensils. Sugar, flour, baking powder, a dance of culinary conjuring unfolded before me. The kitchen, under Oro's territorial rule, demanded finesse. Baking a cake for the discerning chef required careful maneuvering, avoiding his watchful gaze. The aroma of the planned apple cake began to fill the air as I deftly worked through the recipe, calculating the time precisely. As the cake entered the oven, I exhaled, relieved to have completed the first phase. The countdown had begun, and I informed the inn that I needed 30 minutes. Turning my attention to the reason behind this covert operation, I thought of Sean. He had ventured out to procure firewood, an essential commodity for the inn's survival. Sean, an alpha-strain werewolf with a complex past, found solace in the vastness of the universe but struggled with his dual identity on Earth. I continued with the cake preparation, mixing cinnamon, sugar, and lemon juice into peeled apples. Thoughts of Sean's endeavors lingered, his reluctance to leave Earth, the challenges of passing as a human, and the burdens of his past. A familiar chime signaled Officer Hector Murray's arrival. The trunk of his police cruiser revealed a captive, a werewolf woman, defiant and hostile. Murray, committed to his extraterrestrial policing duties, explained the situation. The werewolf, in violation of the Earth Treaty, refused to cooperate. I took charge of the interrogation, questioning her knowledge of the treaty and her lack of arrangements with an inn. Silence followed my inquiries, but Murray revealed that she was headed towards Gertrude Hunt. A timer set by the inn reminded me of the apple cake baking in the oven. "I have to go," I informed the captive werewolf, leaving her with a countdown and the promise of a speech upon Sean's return. In the garage, the inn's tendrils efficiently disarmed the captive, revealing an array of weapons. The tense situation heightened as the werewolf glared at me, and Beast, sensing the tension, snarled in response. As I awaited Sean's return, thoughts of the werewolf's arrival stirred curiosity. The werewolves of all, refugees scattered across worlds, had sought a hero in Sean. His legendary status, fueled by extraordinary feats, made him a reluctant figure of admiration. Officer Murray departed with a gift, 2 skeins of muskox wool yarn for his wife, a gesture of gratitude for his assistance. Alone again, I watched the countdown and reflected on the intertwining of mundane and magical in the life of Gertrude Hunt bed and breakfast. Chapter 2. The cake rested in the spring form. The meringue topping was blush and slightly crispy. It cracked a little, which would get a side eye from Oro, but I didn't care. I reached out and poked the spring form. Barely warm. Okay. A familiar presence crossed the inn's boundary. The magic of the inn shifted in response. If Gertrude Hunt was a dog, it would have raised its head and wagged its tail. Sean was home. Another presence followed, creeping up our driveway. I motioned to the inn, and it produced a screen for me and tossed the feed from the side cameras onto it. Sean's truck had driven up and parked in front of the garage. Behind it, a massive white triaxle with a black dump bed filled with firewood slowly backed its way up the gentle slope of the driveway and around the house. I took a long knife and carefully worked it around the perimeter of the spring form, slicing through the meringue. If you tried to open the pan without it, half of the meringue would come off. Sean got out of his truck. He was tall and corded with hard, lean muscle. You could tell just by looking at him that he was both strong and fast, but there was more to it. Sean looked ready. He projected a kind of calm but alert assurance, and you knew with a deep, instinctual understanding that if a threat appeared, he would respond instantly and with overwhelming force. People sensed it and felt the need to label it. Since we lived in Texas, most of the time they ended up asking him if he played football because somehow saying that guy played football provided a reasonable explanation for Sean's combat readiness. Beast took off, out through the doggy door, and straight to Sean, dancing around his feet and wagging her tail. He bent down to pet her. I unlocked the latch on the pan and gently eased it up and over the cake. Perfect. I dropped the spring form into the sink, set the coffee pot to brew some decaf, and went outside, just in time to watch the dump truck unload a huge pile of firewood onto our grass. I went to stand next to Sean. He smiled at me and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned against him and felt him relax. You made it home, honey. It's all good. The driver, a middle-aged heavy-set man with a ruddy face and short salt and pepper hair, got out and eyeballed it. 7 quarts, he told me proudly. Looks great, I told him. Your husband didn't pay for stacking, the driver reported. He said he needs the exercise. I smiled at Sean. He wasn't my husband, but there was no reason to point that out. We'll take care of it. He sighed. Fine. Let's get it over with. We walked over to the garage. The door slid open. The werewolf woman blinked against the sudden sunlight and saw Sean. Her shoulders straightened, she tossed her hair back with a strategically impatient jerk of her head. Here comes the speech. So that's what you look like. She'd pitched her voice lower, going for husky sexiness. Not bad. No reaction. A man like you stuck in a place like this. What a waste. Sean said nothing. Wilmos is missing, she said. Wilmos was a first-strain werewolf, a veteran, one of the oldest survivors of all. The werewolfism kept him spry, but he was an adult when Sean's parents were born, and he was instrumental in creating their alpha strain. After all was destroyed, Wilmos made his name as a mercenary. Now he ran a weapons shop at Bahachar and served as a go-between for mercenaries and the people who needed them. Wilmos thought Sean walked on water. We'd met by chance, and when Sean decided he wanted to see the universe for himself, Wilmos showed him the ropes. He was the one who'd gotten Sean into that Nexus mess, and I would never forgive him for that. Ever. Wilmos was also responsible for our current enthusiastic suitor problem. During the war on Nexus, Sean had assumed the identity of Turan Aiden, an unkillable general who led the merchant forces of Clan Yuan. In reality, Turan Aidens dropped like flies, but their armor covered them completely, hiding their faces, so when one of them died, the merchants simply hired a new one, put the armor on them, and sent them back into the slaughter. Some only lasted a few days, others a few weeks. Sean was the last Turan Aiden. He had survived for 18 months. When that war finally ended, Sean gave the armor back to the merchants and stayed with me because he loved me. Nobody was supposed to find out that he used to be Turan Aiden, however, Wilmos couldn't keep his mouth shut. He was bursting at the seams with pride and little by little he let that cat out of the bag, one secret conversation at a time. The werewolves knew. The werewolf woman narrowed her eyes at Sean. Word is, Wilmos asked you for help and you turned him down because you were too busy playing house with a human girl. People say you're a coward. That you've gone soft. The wolf who subdued Otrokars and vampire knights, reduced to a mere shadow of himself. So, I came to see for myself what happened to the hero of Nexus. You used to be somebody. What's that like? To just give up and turn your back on a friend? She leaned forward as much as the restraints would allow, focused on him. She'd challenged him in his territory, and now she expected him to react. She would have liked it if he'd hauled her upright, slammed her against the wall, and growled in her face. It would be a display of dominance she could understand. She would submit, and then they would go to search for Wilmos together, without me, so she could prove to him how much more awesome she was as a potential mate. Sean opened his mouth. I don't know you. The werewolf woman blinked. He held his hand out. His broom landed into his fingers, except for him it was always a spear, a sturdy shaft tipped with a razor-sharp blade. Your welcome is withdrawn. He tapped the butt of his spear on the floor. The inn opened, walls and rooms flying out of the way, revealing a hallway leading to a distant door. It snapped open, and the bright sunshine of Bahachar flooded through it. The tendril, binding the werewolf woman, jerked her off the floor. Wait, she screamed. The tendril shot toward the door and tossed her out, into the light. The door slammed shut. The normal architecture of the inn reasserted itself. Beast let out a satisfied bark. A little rough, I said. She'll land on her feet. This is getting tiresome. They need to get the message. We started toward the kitchen. What was that about Wilmos? I asked. Sean shrugged. No idea. Liar. You big fat liar. Did he ask you for help? He always asks me for help. That was true. From Wilmos' point of view, every job could benefit from Sean's presence. He visited the inn at least once a month, and Sean always stopped by his store when we went shopping at Bahachar. I couldn't recall a single time the conversation didn't end with, I've got this little project I'm working on. Wilmos genuinely liked Sean, and not just because Sean was the pinnacle of everything the people of all had tried to achieve. Sean also cared about me, and that made me important to Wilmos as well. If anything happened to us, the old werewolf would come running with a truckload of weapons, and would sacrifice himself to save us without a second thought. Sean saw Wilmos as the closest thing to a grandfather. Logically he knew that his parents were superb fighters, but they were his parents, who had settled into a mundane life on Earth. Wilmos wasn't just an old, grizzled veteran who told war stories and went on adventures. He was bigger than that. To Sean, he was an elder, a link to the planet that was forever lost. A part of Sean knew that he never quite fit into the normal life on Earth. I had introduced him to Bahachar and aliens, but Wilmos was the one who had opened the door to the galaxy for him. You think he might be in trouble? I asked. Last I checked, Wilmos was fully grown. He is well armed, well connected, and able to take care of himself. Just like he did for 50 years before he met me. We walked into the kitchen. Sean sighted the cake and went straight for it. I took a plate out of the cabinet, added a fork, and handed it to him. He took a knife from the butcher block, cut a quarter of the cake, slid it onto the plate, and looked at me, his eyes hopeful. Coffee? Freshly brewed. I poured him a mug of decaf, added some creamer, and brought it over to him. Sean took a sip of his coffee, then a bite of his cake, and sighed happily. The cake is delicious, he said. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. I cut my own slice and sat down across from him. He reached out. I took his hand. He squeezed my fingers, smiled, and ate another bite of cake.